Day 2 of 5.8, this time we're going to solve some problems that have a leading coefficient other than 1, such as this problem right here. So let's start off by listing out all our possible zeros. Factors of the constant, factors of 30. Well, that would be 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 4 doesn't work, 5 and 6 would work, and then after that, 6 is already in our list. Okay, so this is all the factors of the constant. Factors of the leading coefficient, 2, just 1 and 2. So we take all of these numbers here, we divide them by 1, and then take all of them and divide them by 2. Okay, now I skipped over anything that was already in the list. Like, for example, 2 divided by 2 is 1. Skip that. 6 divided by 2, basically anything that's even. Okay, 30 divided by 2 is 15. That's already in our list, etc., etc. Those are our possible zeros. All right, next, let's start plugging things in. Okay, it's missing that x squared there, so we have to put in a 0x squared. All right, let's start with 1. Okay, and go through, multiply, add, on and on. Okay, and fortunately for us, 1 does work as a 0. Okay, the factor would be x minus 1, which means so far we're here. Okay, this parenthesis comes from the coefficients at the bottom there. Okay, this in green is not something that we can factor with earmuffs, okay, or any other method, so we have to keep doing synthetic division. Now 1 just worked as a 0, but we want to try that one again just to make sure it's not a 1 over and over and over again. So let's take 1, let's plug it in, multiply, add. Okay, see what we get. We get something that's not a 0. Okay, so at this point we can move on to the next thing in the list. I like to do 1, -1, 2, -2, etc. So that's the order that I'm going to go in. So now I'm plugging in a -1. When I do that, I get something else that's not a 0. Okay, on and on. Okay, to the +2. Still not a 0. Okay, and that's the trouble with these, is that sometimes you just have to keep doing it over and over again. All right, let's try -2. Multiply those, we get -4. Add them together, -11. Multiply, add. Multiply, add. All right, so this one works. That's a 0. X plus 2 would be the factor, x minus -2. All right, so at this point, we have this function at the bottom. Okay, this is what we would look to factor. Let's do that on the next slide. All right, so we want to factor that trinomial that's in red there. We're going to use earmuffs on it. Blank times blank equals 30. Blank plus blank equals -11. The two numbers are 5 and 6, both negative. Now this has a coefficient that's not 1, which means we need to do those two fractions. 2x over -6. This we can simplify. X over -3. 2x over -5 we can't simplify. We would leave it just as it is. And at this point we could write it fully factored with our 2 zeros and then what we did for earmuffs as that last part. To find the possible zeros, we just take each of these, we set it equal to 0, like this, for example. Solve it out. So the first 3 are easy. 1, -2, +3. The last one, solve it out algebraically, and we get 5 over 2. Okay, so those are our 4 zeros. Also note, all of those numbers are in our list of possible zeros. Let's do one more. Factors of the constant, 32. 1 times 32, 2 times 16, 3 does not work, 4 times 8, 5 does not work, 6 does not work, 7 does not work. 8 is already in our list. Okay, so that's the factors of the constant. Factors of the leading coefficient, only 1 times 2. And then we take all these numbers and we divide them by 1 to start. And then after that, we divide them all by 2. And the only new thing when we divide by 2 is 1/2. Okay, because 2 over 2, for example, is 1. 4 over 2 is 2. All those other numbers end up in that list right there. All right, so now we want to start plugging in numbers. Put in our coefficients. When we look at these coefficients, notice that they're all positive. because they're all positive. I'm not going to bother plugging in any positive numbers. I need some negative signs in here somewhere, and I don't have any. Okay, I want it to eventually get to a 0 over here. Okay, and without negative signs in the actual coefficients, I need to use one of these numbers here. Okay, so I'm going to just plug in -1, -2, -4, -8, etc. We'll start with -1. Okay, multiply them, add it together, repeat that process over and over. I'm going to go through this kind of fast because ideally at this point you know how to do synthetic division, synthetic substitution. We get a 2, that's not a 0, that's no good. Let's try it again. Let's go to the next negative number in the list, -2. On and on. And we get a 0. So -2 works. X minus -2, or x plus 2, would be the factor. Okay, 2x cubed plus 12x squared plus 24x plus 16 is left over. Now, if you look at that, you probably, or you may notice that there is a GCF there. You could take it out, but I'm not going to bother. Okay, I'm just going to keep going with those coefficients, and I always want to check the number that I just tried previously. So I'm going to try -2 again. Okay, and when I do that, I see that -2 works the second time. Okay, so right now, I have x plus 2 for the first 0, and x plus 2 for the second 0. Left over, I have this, 2x squared plus 8x plus 8. Okay, this I want to factor, and since there is a coefficient there, a GCF there, let's take that out. Okay, and anytime you take out a GCF, make sure you don't lose it. It's going to need to go in your answer. So let's go ahead and write what we have so far in our answer. So that GCF is down there, our 2 zeros are down there. Left over, we have x squared plus 4x plus 4. We want to earmuff this. 2 and 2 are our numbers. Okay, we're not changing these. We're just putting them into 2 new parentheses. So if you didn't recheck this -2, you would have never found any of the other zeros. You would have plugged in all these only to find out that none of them worked. Okay, that's why we always check the same number, okay, because it's possible it's something like this where it's the same root over and over and over again. You can write this like that, all written out like that, or you can just write it as 2 times x plus 2 to the 4th power. When it comes to the zeros, there's really 4. It's just the same thing 4 times. If you just wrote it 1 time, that's okay.